The sound of my own power drill echoing through my bedroom at 3 in the afternoon should have been my first clue. I'd been running it for 14 hours straight on the Henderson job site, and the batteries were dead as roadkill. Yet there it was, that familiar whir coming from upstairs, along with sounds that made my stomach drop like a sledgehammer through thin ice. I dropped my tool bag at the bottom of the stairs. 22 years of marriage, and Linda had never shown interest in home improvement. Hell, she complained when I left a screwdriver on the kitchen counter, but apparently, she'd found someone willing to teach her about power tools. The bedroom door was cracked open. Through the gap, I saw my wife's pale legs wrapped around Rick Donnelly, her ex-husband, the town's golden boy firefighter. They were going at it on the bed I'd built with my own hands, using the drill I'd saved up 3 months to buy. My personal items were scattered across the floor like they meant nothing. Wedding photos, face down. My work boots kicked into a corner. I grabbed the .357 from my nightstand drawer, not to use it, just to feel something solid in my shaking hands. "Get out," I said, stepping into the doorway. Rick didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. He climbed off my wife with a smirk, taking his sweet time pulling on his uniform pants. "Relax, Tommy. Adults are talking." But before I could respond, my daughters appeared in the hallway behind me. Sarah, 17, and Emma, 15. The kids I'd coached through Little League and driven to dance recitals and stayed up nights with when they had nightmares. "Dad, you're not in charge of this family anymore," Sarah said, her voice cold as January wind. "Uncle Rick is twice the man you'll ever be." I didn't say a word, just smiled and walked out. The next day, they got one text from me. My phone exploded with 57 desperate messages, all begging me to come back. But I was already gone. The Sleepy Inn motel smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. $48 a night bought me a saggy bed, a TV with 3 working channels, and a view of the dumpster behind Murphy's Bar. I'd been living there 2 weeks, and the night clerk, a guy named Pete with more tattoos than teeth, had become my closest friend. "Your wife's been calling the front desk," Pete said, sliding a beer across the check-in counter. "Wants to know if you're eating right." Touching concern, considering she's been feeding me lies for months. "You gonna go back?" I popped the beer open with my multi-tool. "Oh, I'm going back all right, just not the way she thinks." The plan started forming that night. Nothing dramatic. I'm a carpenter, not a movie hero. But 22 years in construction teaches you how things are built, and more importantly, how they fall apart. First, I needed my tools back. Linda had insisted I retrieve them for the girl's sake, like she was doing me some kind of favor. Tuesday morning, I drove my pickup to the house I'd renovated from foundation to roof, the house where I'd installed every light fixture, sanded every floorboard, painted every wall. Rick's patrol car sat in my driveway like he owned the place. I knocked on my own front door. Linda answered, dressed in a new outfit I hadn't seen before, probably bought with money from our joint account. "Tommy, the girls are upset. This whole situation. I'm here for my tools, nothing else." She stepped aside, and I walked into my living room. Rick lounged on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, watching my TV. He was in civilian clothes, jeans and a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym muscles. Everything about him screamed, "Look at me." "Afternoon, Tommy," he said without looking up. "Hope you don't mind me making myself comfortable. Linda says you won't be needing this place much longer." My tools were scattered across the garage floor like someone had dumped them from a height. Thousands of dollars worth of equipment I'd collected over 2 decades, treated like junk. "Careful with that stuff," I said, kneeling to pack my cordless saw. "Some of it's worth more than your patrol car." Rick laughed. "Right. Look, Tommy, let's keep this simple. Linda's moving on. The girls are happy. Maybe it's time you did the same." I stood up, holding my toolbox. Sarah and Emma watched from the kitchen doorway, their faces hard. Behind them, half the neighborhood had found excuses to be in their yards, pretending not to stare. "You know what, Rick? You're absolutely right." I set the toolbox down and pulled out my demolition hammer. "I am moving on, but first I need to finish some unfinished business." His smirk faded. "What's that supposed to mean?" I hefted the hammer, feeling its familiar weight. "How fast do you think someone can tear down what took 20 years to build?" The color drained from his face. Linda stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Tommy, don't you dare—" "Relax," I said, loading the hammer back into my box. "I'm talking about starting over, clean slate, fresh foundation." But as I walked to my truck, I caught Rick's reflection in my side mirror. He was talking fast into his cell phone, probably calling his buddies at the station. Good. Let them think I was just another bitter ex-husband making empty threats. They had no idea what kind of foundation I was planning to pour. The first crack in their perfect life appeared 3 days later. Rick's pride and joy, a restored 1979 Camaro he'd been bragging about at Murphy's bar for months, developed a mysterious paint problem overnight. Someone had apparently spilled industrial paint thinner across the hood and roof while he was on shift, the kind of thinner that eats through clear coat like acid through skin. Damn vandals, Rick told anyone who'd listen. Probably some punk kids. I nodded sympathetically when the story reached me through Pete. That's terrible. A classic car like that must have cost him thousands. What I didn't mention was that industrial paint thinner leaves distinctive patterns when applied with a specific type of brush. The kind contractors use for surface prep, the kind only professionals would recognize, the kind Rick would never think to look for. But the car was just an appetizer. The main course came when I discovered Linda's real plan. I'd gone to Murphy's for dinner. Their Tuesday special was the only decent meal I could afford, when I overheard Linda's best friend Katie talking to the bartender. Linda's got it all figured out, Katie was saying, 3 drinks past discretion. The divorce settlement, custody, everything. Rick's been helping her document Tommy's behavior. You know, anger issues, threatening language, unsuitable living conditions. My beer suddenly tasted like sawdust. That's smart, the bartender said. Guy loses his temper, starts making threats. Judge will see right through that. Plus, Rick's got connections at the courthouse. His cousin works in family services. Linda's going to get the house, the girls, and half of Tommy's business if there's anything left after the legal fees. They laughed. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. Outside, I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, hands shaking with rage. Not at the betrayal, I'd expected that, but at my own stupidity. While I'd been playing small-time pranks with paint thinner, they'd been building a legal case to destroy everything I'd worked for. Time to get serious. My brother-in-law Mike was the only family member still speaking to me. He worked nights at the paper mill and had never liked Rick, calling him that preening jackass at every family gathering. Tommy, you need to be smart about this, Mike said over coffee at the diner. Linda's got the high ground. Rick's got the badge. You go after them directly. You'll end up in cuffs. I'm not going after them, I said. I'm going after everything they think they've won. What's that mean? I pulled out a notebook filled with names, dates, and connections I'd been mapping for weeks. Small towns are like spiderwebs. Touch one strand, the whole thing vibrates. Linda's got her job at the bank because Katie recommended her to the branch manager. Rick's got his overtime shifts because his sergeant owes him favors. Their whole social circle is built on mutual back-scratching and shared secrets. Mike studied the notebook. Jesus, Tommy, how long you been working on this? 2 weeks? Amazing what you learn when people think you're just another bitter ex hiding in a motel room. This is dangerous territory. I closed the notebook. So was coming home to find another man in my bed. Mike sighed. What do you need? Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just a friend who remembers what loyalty means. He nodded slowly. What's the first move? Katie Morrison thinks she's untouchable because her husband's the deputy fire chief, but she's got a gambling problem she's been hiding for 2 years. Online poker, specifically. Lost about $8,000 last month alone. How do you know that? Because she brags about her investment strategies at the bank, but her checking account tells a different story. Linda's been covering her shortfalls, thinking nobody would notice. Mike whistled low. And I'm gonna make sure the right people find out exactly where Katie's been getting her gambling money. That'll destroy her marriage. Good. Maybe she'll think twice before helping destroy mine. But Katie was just the first domino. I had bigger plans for Rick and Linda. The Riverside Community Center hosted its annual summer barbecue the last Saturday in July. Half the town showed up for burgers, gossip, and the kind of small-town politicking that decides everything from school board elections to who gets the good shifts at the fire station. I arrived fashionably late, wearing my best shirt and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Linda and Rick held court near the beer tent, surrounded by their usual crowd of admirers. My daughters sat at a picnic table nearby, both studiously ignoring my arrival. Tommy, called out Bill Henderson, my former boss. Didn't expect to see you here. Wouldn't miss it, I said, loud enough for half the crowd to hear. Nothing like celebrating community values with the people who matter most. Linda's head snapped around. Our eyes met across 20 yards of grass, and I raised my beer in a mock toast. I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and making small talk. Everyone knew about the separation. In a town of 4,000, everybody knows everything. But I played the part of the wounded but dignified husband, accepting condolences with grace. These things happen, I told Mrs. Patterson from the library. Sometimes people change. Sometimes they show their true colors. You're handling it well, she said, patting my arm. That takes character. Character's important, I agreed, especially when you are raising children. You want them to learn the difference between right and wrong, between loyalty and betrayal. My voice carried further than necessary. Several heads turned, including Linda's. I moved through the crowd like a politician, working every conversation. With the bank president, I mentioned how sorry I was that Linda would be leaving her position. The stress of the divorce, you understand. She needs time to figure out her priorities. With Rick Sargent, I expressed concern about Rick's focus lately. Not that it's my place to say anything, but a man going through a messy situation with another man's wife, well, it affects judgment. Hopefully it won't impact his professional responsibilities. Each comment was carefully calibrated. Nothing actionable, nothing legally problematic. Just seeds of doubt, planted in fertile ground. The main event came during the traditional toast. Every year, the community center president asked folks to share thoughts about family and tradition. This year, he called on me. I stood up, beer in hand, and waited for the crowd to quiet. I want to thank everyone for their support during this difficult time, I began. Divorce is never easy, especially when there are children involved, but it's important to remember what we're really fighting for. I gestured toward my daughters who were staring at their phones. We're fighting for honesty, for integrity, for the idea that promises mean something, that marriage vows aren't just pretty words you say until something better comes along. Uncomfortable shifting in the crowd, Linda's face was turning red. We're fighting for the belief that a man's home is his castle, not a place where other men can come and go as they please, using his tools, sleeping in his bed, turning his children against him. Rick started to stand, but Linda grabbed his arm. Most importantly, we're fighting for the truth, because eventually, no matter how many lies people tell, no matter how many secrets they keep, the truth has a way of coming out, usually when you least expect it. I raised my beer. To family values, the real kind. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. Then people started clapping, uncertain but polite. I sat down, satisfied with the performance. Rick was at my table 30 seconds later. You son of a witch, he hissed, leaning down so only I could hear. You think you can embarrass us in front of the whole town? I think I just gave a nice speech about family values, I said mildly. Unless there was something embarrassing about it. You know exactly what you did. I stood up, and suddenly we were face to face. Rick had 3 inches and 30 pounds on me, but I had something he didn't. Nothing left to lose. What I did, I said clearly, was tell the truth. If that embarrasses you, maybe you should think about why. He grabbed my shirt. Outside, now. Rick, no. Linda appeared beside him, her voice panicked. Not here, not in front of everyone. But I was already moving. I stepped backward, deliberately, letting his grip pull me off balance. I stumbled into the dessert table, sending a chocolate cake flying. It landed squarely on Mrs. Patterson's white dress. The crowd gasped. Rick immediately let go, but the damage was done. To everyone watching, it looked like he'd attacked me unprovoked. Accident, I said quickly, brushing frosting off my shirt. My fault entirely. Sometimes I'm clumsier than I think. But Sarah appeared at Rick's side, her face twisted with fury. Before anyone could stop her, she spit directly in my face. You're pathetic, she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. A pathetic, bitter old man who can't accept that nobody wants him around. I wiped the spit away slowly, making sure everyone saw. The silence was deafening. Well, I said finally, I guess we know where we all stand. I walked away without looking back, leaving Rick and Linda to deal with the stares and whispers of 400 neighbors. But the real fireworks were just getting started. The beauty of small towns is that everyone knows everyone else's business. The curse is that everyone thinks they know everyone else's business. Sometimes those two things aren't the same. Katie Morrison, for instance, thought nobody knew about her online gambling habit. She was wrong. By Tuesday morning, screenshots of her poker account activity were anonymously delivered to her husband, the bank president, and the local newspaper editor. Rick's cousin in family services thought nobody knew he'd been feeding information about custody cases to his family. He was also wrong. A carefully worded tip to the state oversight board triggered an investigation that would take months to resolve. Linda thought her after-hours meetings with Rick at the bank were discreet. But security cameras don't lie, and bank employees who feel their jobs threatened by nepotism don't keep secrets. I didn't make any of these phone calls myself. I didn't have to. In a town where everybody talks, all you need to do is make sure the right information reaches the right ears. Within a week, Linda was on administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. Katie's husband had filed for divorce and frozen their joint accounts. Rick was under internal review for conduct unbecoming after a citizen complaint about his personal use of department resources. And I was still just the bitter ex-husband living in a motel, apparently doing nothing but drinking beer and feeling sorry for himself. Pete found me in the motel office, reading the local paper's coverage of the various scandals. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he said. I looked up from an article about Rick's suspension. "Enjoying what? Watching them all fall apart?" I folded the paper carefully. "Pete, I'm a simple man. I work with my hands, I pay my taxes, and I try to treat people fairly. When people don't treat me fairly in return, well, sometimes the universe has a way of balancing things out." The universe, right? Amazing how much trouble people can get into when they think nobody's watching. Pete shook his head. "Just be careful, Tommy. This kind of thing has a way of coming back around." He was right, of course, but I was counting on it. The first real crack in my plan came from an unexpected source, my own friend Dave, who'd been quietly feeding information to Linda since the separation began. I discovered it by accident. Dave owned the auto shop where I'd been getting my truck serviced for 15 years. Good guy, loyal friend, or so I thought. But when I stopped by to pick up my truck after an oil change, I heard him on the phone in his office. "Yeah, he's been asking questions about Rick's car. Real specific questions about paint damage." "No, Linda, I don't think he did it, but look, Tommy's not stupid. If he wanted to mess with someone, he'd know how to make it look like an accident." I stood in his doorway until he noticed me. The color drained from his face. "I gotta go," he said into the phone, then hung up. 15 years, Dave. "Tommy, listen. 15 years of friendship, of bringing you business, of helping you move when your wife left, of being there when your dad died." He couldn't meet my eyes. "She said you were making threats, getting dangerous. I was worried about you. So you decided to spy on me." "It wasn't like that." "What was it like?" He finally looked up. "She's scared, Tommy, really scared. She thinks you might do something crazy." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dave, if I wanted to do something crazy, you think I'd be living in a motel room eating gas station sandwiches? You think I'd be having oil changes and making small talk about the weather? Then what are you doing?" "I'm being patient," I said. "I'm letting people show me exactly who they are. And apparently, you just did." I walked out without my truck. Let him wonder when I'd be back for it. But Dave's betrayal taught me something important. I was running out of allies, and my enemies were getting nervous. Time to escalate. The Henderson Construction Company had given me steady work for 12 years. Bill Henderson was a fair boss and a decent man, but he was also a businessman with a reputation to protect. When Linda started spreading stories about my erratic behavior and potential for violence, Bill had to distance himself. "Tommy, you know I hate this," he said when I stopped by the office. "But Linda's got people talking, saying you might be unstable. And you believe them? I believe you're going through hell, but I also believe you're smart enough not to let it destroy your career." I sat across from his desk, the same desk where we'd negotiated contracts and bonuses for over a decade. "What are you saying, Bill?" "I'm saying maybe you should take some time. Get your head straight. Let this divorce thing settle down. You're firing me. I'm giving you a leave of absence, unpaid but with full benefits. When things calm down, you'll have found someone else to do my job." He didn't deny it. I stood up. 12 years, Bill. Never missed a deadline, never cut corners, never caused you a single problem. But Rick Donnelly whispers in the right ears, and suddenly I'm unemployable. It's not personal. Everything's personal. I headed for the door, then turned back. "You know what's funny? You're worried about my reputation affecting your business, but you never asked what I might know about other people's reputations." "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled. "Just that small towns are funny places, full of secrets. Some people think their secrets are safe because they've got friends in the right places. But friends can become enemies real quick when money's involved." I left him with that thought. 2 days later, an anonymous tip reached the state labor board about Henderson Construction's practice of paying some workers off the books to avoid taxes and insurance costs. Nothing I'd been involved in, but plenty I'd observed over 12 years. Bill would spend the next 6 months dealing with audits and fines. His business would survive, but his profit margins wouldn't. As I said, everything's personal. The town's annual Founders' Day celebration was scheduled for the third weekend in August. Carnival rides, live music, local politicians making speeches, and half the county showing up to eat fried dough and gossip about their neighbors. Perfect venue for a public confrontation. Rick had been avoiding me since the barbecue incident, but his pride was bigger than his common sense. When word got around that I'd been asking questions about his work schedule, his overtime claims, and his use of department vehicles for personal business, he decided it was time for a showdown. The message came through Dave, of all people. Rick wants to meet you at the fairgrounds Saturday night, after the fireworks. Says it's time to settle this like men. And what did you tell him? I told him he was an idiot. Tommy, this is exactly what Linda's been saying, that you're looking for a fight. Maybe I am. Come on, you're smarter than this. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like being smart got me a cheating wife, ungrateful daughters, and a town full of former friends who think I'm the problem. Dave shook his head. This won't fix anything. Maybe not, but it'll sure as hell feel good. Saturday arrived gray and humid, with the kind of oppressive heat that makes tempers run short. I spent the afternoon at the carnival, playing the part of the sad divorcee trying to reconnect with community life. I bought cotton candy I didn't eat, watched teenagers flirt on the tilt-a-whirl, and made awkward small talk with people who clearly wished I'd stay home. Linda and Rick arrived during the evening concert, surrounded by their usual entourage. My daughters were with them, both dressed like they were going to a nightclub instead of a small-town festival. They'd grown up fast in the past few months. Or maybe I just hadn't been paying attention before. I positioned myself near the beer tent where I'd have a clear view of the main stage and easy access to witnesses. Rick spotted me immediately and started working his way through the crowd, playing to his audience. "Look who decided to show up," he said loudly enough for nearby families to hear. "Thought you'd be too embarrassed to show your face after last week. I live here too, Rick. Got as much right as anyone." "Right." He stepped closer, his uniform shirt tight across his chest. "You got the right to a lot of things. Question is whether you deserve them." People were starting to stare. Good. Deserve them? I kept my voice level. Reasonable. Like I deserved to come home and find my wife in bed with her ex-husband? That's between you and Linda. Is it? Because it seems like you made it everyone's business when you started telling people I was dangerous, when you started spreading stories about my mental state, when you got me fired from my job. His face flushed. Nobody got you fired. You did that yourself with your paranoid BS. Paranoid? I nodded thoughtfully. That's what you call it when someone notices their power drill being used in their bedroom by another man. The crowd around us was growing. Linda appeared at Rick's shoulder, her face tight with embarrassment. "Tommy, please," she said, "not here, not in front of everyone." "Why not here? You didn't mind making a spectacle when you were screwing him in my house. You didn't mind humiliating me in front of our daughters." "That's enough," Rick said, stepping between us. "Is it? Because I'm just getting started." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app I'd been using for the past month. "Want to hear something interesting? It's a conversation between my loving wife and her boyfriend, recorded 3 nights ago outside Murphy's bar." Linda's face went white. "You've been following us?" "Honey, this is a small town. I don't need to follow you. I just need to listen." I pressed play. Linda's voice, slightly distorted but clearly audible, came through the phone's speaker. "Rick, we need to be more careful. If Tommy finds out about the custody plan, relax. My cousin's got it handled. The judge will see exactly what we want him to see." "But what if he fights it? With what money? By the time we're done, he'll be lucky to afford a decent lawyer, let alone keep his business." I stopped the recording. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. "Funny thing about small towns," I said conversationally. "Sound really carries at night, especially when people think they're being discreet." Rick's hand moved toward his belt, not for his weapon, but for his handcuffs. Muscle memory from 15 years of police work. "That recording won't hold up in court," he said. "Probably not, but it doesn't need to, does it? Because everyone here just heard it." I looked around at the crowd of neighbors, co-workers, friends, and strangers who'd been watching our drama unfold for months. Some looked shocked. Some looked disgusted. A few looked like they'd suspected all along. See, that's the thing about truth, I continued. It doesn't need a courtroom, it just needs an audience. Rick lunged at me then, finally losing control. But I was ready for him. As he grabbed for my shirt, I stepped backward and to the side, letting his momentum carry him past me. His foot caught on a discarded beer cup, and he went down hard in the grass, his uniform shirt riding up to reveal a pale belly and the kind of underwear you'd expect from a man trying too hard to impress younger women. The crowd gasped. A few people laughed. Someone's phone was definitely recording. I stood over him, not offering to help him up. You know what, Rick? You're right about one thing. I did lose my family. I lost my job, I lost my house, and my friends, and my reputation. He rolled over, grass stains on his shirt, trying to salvage some dignity. But here's what you didn't count on, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. You can't destroy a man who's got nothing left to lose. You can only make him dangerous. I turned to Linda, who was standing frozen with embarrassment. 22 years, Linda. 22 years I worked 60-hour weeks to give you everything you wanted. I built that house with my own hands. I raised those girls like they were precious jewels. And when things got tough, when the romance wore off and real life set in, you decided it was easier to start over with someone else than to fight for what we had. Tommy, please. But you know what the really funny part is? You thought you were trading up. You thought Rick was some kind of prize. I gestured toward Rick, who was finally getting to his feet, his face red with humiliation. Look at him, Linda. Really look. This is your knight in shining armor? A middle-aged cop with a beer gut and a midlife crisis who can't even stay on his feet when someone disagrees with him? That's enough! Sarah's voice cut through the crowd. My older daughter pushed through the onlookers, her face twisted with fury. You're pathetic. Mom's better off without you. Maybe she is, I agreed. But she's not better off with him. I turned back to the crowd, most of whom were still recording with their phones. See, here's what nobody wants to talk about. Rick Donnelly isn't some hero who rescued my wife from a bad marriage. He's a hunter who saw an opportunity and took it. He's been sniffing around Linda for months, feeding her lines about how she deserved better, how I didn't appreciate her. You don't know what you're talking about, Rick said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't I? Tell them about the text messages, Rick. The ones you sent while I was working 12-hour days to keep the roof over our heads. Tell them about how you convinced her that divorce was better than counseling, that starting over was better than working things out. I pulled out my phone again. Or better yet, let me tell them. Linda made a grab for the phone, but I stepped away. This one's from February 14th, Valentine's Day. How romantic. You deserve someone who sees how special you are. T doesn't know what he has. That's T for Tommy, in case anyone's wondering. Murmurs from the crowd. Rick's face was getting redder. Here's another one. When you're ready to make a change, I'll be here. I never stopped loving you. That's from March 3rd, the day after Linda and I had dinner to celebrate our anniversary. Stop, Linda whispered, but I was just getting warmed up. Oh, this is my favorite. From April 7th. It's too stupid to see what's right in front of him. When this is over, we'll show everyone what a real relationship looks like. I looked up at the crowd, which had grown to include most of the festival attendees. 37 text messages between February and May. 37 messages from a married woman's ex-husband telling her how unhappy she must be, how much better life could be, how easy it would be to just start over. You went through my phone, Linda said accusingly. I fixed your phone when you dropped it in the sink, remember? You thanked me for saving all your pictures and messages. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. But here's the really interesting part, I continued. Rick's been divorced 3 times. 3 marriages, 3 failures, 3 sets of kids who don't speak to him anymore. And Linda thought this was the guy to build a future with? My personal life is none of your business, Rick said, finally finding his voice. It became my business when you made it my business. When you turned my wife against me, poisoned my daughters, cost me my job, and tried to steal everything I'd worked for. I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear my next words. But most of all, it became my business when you decided I was too stupid to fight back. Then I raised my voice so everyone could hear. Rick Donnelly, you want to know what a real man does when someone tries to destroy his life? He doesn't whine about it. He doesn't make threats. He doesn't lose his temper and embarrass himself in front of the whole town. I gestured toward Rick's grass-stained uniform and disheveled appearance. He gets even. The crowd was completely silent now, waiting for whatever came next. Linda, you want to know why I never fought for our marriage? Why I didn't beg you to come back or promise to change or make some grand romantic gesture? She stared at me, tears starting to form in her eyes. Because a man doesn't fight for someone who's already decided he's not worth fighting for. And a man doesn't waste time on someone who'd rather believe lies about him than remember 22 years of truth. I turned to face the entire crowd. But most importantly, a man doesn't let other people write the ending to his story. I pulled out a manila envelope I'd been carrying and handed it to Rick. Congratulations, Rick. You're being served. His hands shook as he opened it. What is this? Restraining order. Effective immediately. You're not allowed within 500 feet of me, my motel room, or my place of business. You don't have a place of business. I smiled. I do now. I'm starting my own construction company. Already got 3 contracts lined up, including one with the county to renovate the courthouse. Turns out, when people see a man get kicked while he's down and watch him get back up, they respect that. Rick was scanning the legal documents, his face growing paler. This also includes a formal complaint with the state police about your use of department resources for personal business, your involvement in a conspiracy to manipulate custody proceedings, and your violation of several ethics policies. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to prove it. I just have to make the accusation. Let the investigation sort out the details. I turned to Linda. And this is for you. I handed her a second envelope. Divorce papers. I'm not asking for the house. You can keep it. I'm not asking for custody. The girls made their choice clear. I'm not even asking for alimony. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. All I want is my tools, my truck, and my freedom. Oh, and one more thing. I looked around at the crowd of neighbors and friends who'd watched my life fall apart and done nothing to help. I want everyone here to remember this moment. Remember that when you thought Tommy Wilson was down and out, when you wrote him off as just another bitter ex-husband, he was actually planning his comeback. I gestured toward Rick, who was still standing there in his stained uniform, holding legal papers he couldn't quite understand. Remember that when you thought Rick Donnelly was some kind of hero, he was actually just a hunter who couldn't even handle confronting the man whose life he tried to steal. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Then someone in the crowd started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Not everyone, Linda's friends, stood frozen, and Rick's cop buddies looked uncomfortable. But enough people clapped to make it clear which way the wind was blowing. I picked up my phone and the empty envelopes, brushing grass off my jeans. Linda, I hope you and Rick are very happy together. I really do. Because after tonight, you're going to need each other more than ever. I started walking away, then turned back one final time. Oh, and Rick? That restraining order works both ways. You come near me, you contact me, you even look at me wrong, and I'll have you arrested. And unlike you, I've got witnesses who'll tell the truth about what they saw. I walked through the crowd, which parted to let me pass. Behind me, I could hear Linda crying, and Rick trying to salvage some dignity by barking orders at people to disperse. But I didn't look back. I'd said everything I needed to say. The aftermath was everything I'd hoped for and more brutal than I'd expected. By Monday morning, video of Rick's humiliation was all over social media. Someone had edited it with circus music and posted it on YouTube with the title, "Local Cop Falls Down, Can't Get Up." It had 12,000 views by noon. Linda called in sick to work, or tried to. But her administrative leave had become a suspension pending investigation, and the bank president made it clear that her future with the company was uncertain at best. Rick's situation was worse. The state police investigation I'd triggered with my complaint had uncovered irregularities in his overtime reports, questionable use of department vehicles, and, most damaging, evidence that he'd been sharing confidential information about ongoing cases with Linda and her friends. But the real damage was social. In a small town, reputation is everything, and theirs was in ruins. I, on the other hand, was experiencing an unexpected renaissance. The 3 construction contracts I'd mentioned weren't imaginary. Bill Henderson's legal troubles had created opportunities for other contractors, and my reputation for quality work had survived the personal drama. Pete from the motel had recommended me to his brother, who owned a small development company. Word spread from there. More importantly, people were seeing me differently. The bitter ex-husband narrative that Linda and Rick had been pushing didn't survive contact with reality. I wasn't drinking myself to passing or stalking my ex-wife or making threats. I was working, paying my bills, and rebuilding my life with quiet dignity. Well, mostly quiet. "Tommy, you need to see this," Pete said, waving me into the motel office on Wednesday morning. He had his laptop open to the local newspaper's website. The headline read, "Police officer under investigation for ethics violations." "They're not naming him specifically," Pete said, "but everyone knows who it is." I read the article over his shoulder. Rick's cousin in family services had been suspended pending the investigation I'd triggered. The bank had launched its own internal review of Linda's activities. And the fire chief, Katie's husband, had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial misconduct. "You did all this?" Pete asked. "I didn't do anything," I said truthfully. "I just made sure the right information reached the right people at the right time." "That's not nothing." "No," I agreed. "It's not." But even I hadn't anticipated how far the ripples would spread. Katie Morrison's gambling debts were worse than I'd thought. When her husband froze their accounts, she couldn't make her payments to some very unforgiving creditors. By Thursday, she was asking everyone she knew for loans, claiming she had a temporary cash flow problem. Linda, already dealing with her own financial crisis, couldn't help. Rick, facing potential job loss and legal bills, had no money to spare. The social circle that had seemed so solid a month ago was crumbling under the weight of shared secrets and mutual recriminations. Dave, my former friend at the auto shop, stopped by the motel Friday evening. "Tommy, we need to talk." I was sitting outside my room, reading a book and enjoying the first cool evening in weeks. "What about?" "About forgiveness, about moving on." I marked my place in the book and looked up at him. "Whose idea was this conversation, yours or Linda's?" His face reddened. "Mine. Look, I know I screwed up. I know I betrayed your trust. But this thing you're doing, this revenge campaign, it's destroying the whole town. Is it? Or is it just revealing what was already there?" "Katie's marriage is over. Rick might lose his job. Linda's career is finished. How's any of that helping you?" I stood up, setting the book aside. "Dave, let me ask you something. When Linda was spreading lies about me being dangerous, did you defend me? When Rick was getting me fired from my job, did you speak up for me? Tommy, when my own daughters were spitting in my face and calling me pathetic, did any of you think maybe there was another side to the story?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "You want to talk about forgiveness?" I continued. "Let's talk about it. You all forgave Linda for cheating on her husband. You forgave Rick for seducing another man's wife. You forgave my daughters for betraying their father. Hell, you even forgave yourselves for standing by and watching it happen. That's different. Is it? Because it seems to me like forgiveness only flows in one direction in this town. Everyone else gets understanding and second chances and the benefit of the doubt. But when Tommy Wilson fights back, suddenly he's the villain." Dave shook his head. "This isn't fighting back. This is scorched earth." "You're right," I said. "It is, because that's the only language you people understand. We're not your enemies, Tommy." "No? Then what are you?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. "You're bystanders," I said. "You're people who stand around and watch while good men get destroyed, then wring your hands and talk about moving on when those men finally decide to fight back." I picked up my book. "I'm done being understanding, Dave. I'm done being the bigger man. I'm done pretending that what happened to me doesn't matter because it makes other people uncomfortable. So what happens now? Now you all live with the consequences of your choices, just like I had to live with mine." He left without another word. Saturday morning brought the biggest surprise yet. Sarah knocked on my motel room door at 8 a.m., looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Dad, can we talk?" I opened the door wider, gesturing for her to come in. She looked around the small room. Unmade bed, clothes folded neatly on the dresser, coffee pot and hot plate on the nightstand. "This is where you've been living? It's not much, but it's mine." She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I saw the video from the festival. And I heard what you said about the text messages." I waited. "I went through Mom's phone last night," she said quietly. "When she was asleep, I found them. Sarah, all of them. Going back months. Everything you said was true. Her voice broke on the last word. He was manipulating her, telling her what she wanted to hear, making her think you didn't love us anymore. I sat down in the room's single chair, suddenly feeling very tired. Your mother made her own choices, Sarah. Rick didn't force her to do anything. But he made it easy. He made it seem like the right thing to do. Maybe it was the right thing. Maybe your mother really is better off without me. She looked up sharply. Do you believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, I could hear traffic starting to pick up as the town woke up for another day of gossip and recrimination. I'm sorry, Sarah said finally, for what I said at the barbecue, for spitting at you, for everything. You were protecting your mother, I understand that. I was being cruel. Yes, I agreed. You were. She started crying then, not the angry tears of a teenager, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone who's just realized how badly they've hurt someone they love. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, that we could fix this, but I couldn't. Because some things, once broken, don't go back together the same way. Emma wants to see you too, she said when she'd gotten control of herself. But she's scared. Scared of what? That you hate us now, that we ruined everything and you'll never forgive us. I thought about Dave's visit the night before, his talk of forgiveness and moving on. I don't hate you, I said carefully, but I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. The man who would have forgiven anything, overlooked everything just to keep the family together, that man is gone. What does that mean? It means I love you, but I won't be anyone's doormat ever again. It means if you want a relationship with me, it has to be on equal terms. No more princess treatment, no more pretending that disrespect is acceptable because you're young or hurt or confused. She nodded slowly. What about Mom? What about her? Do you think you'll ever forgive her? I looked out the window at the town where I'd spent my entire adult life, where I'd built a career and raised a family and thought I'd grow old. Forgiveness isn't the issue, Sarah. The issue is trust. And once that's gone, it doesn't come back just because someone says they're sorry. But she is sorry. Really sorry. She knows she made a mistake. She's sorry she got caught. She's sorry there were consequences. But if I hadn't come home early that day, if I hadn't seen what I saw, how long do you think it would have gone on? Sarah didn't answer. That's the difference between regret and remorse, I said. Regret is wishing things had turned out differently. Remorse is acknowledging that you were wrong and accepting responsibility for the damage you caused. She does accept responsibility, does she? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she's spent the last 6 months trying to convince everyone that this was somehow my fault, that I drove her to it with my work schedule or my attitude or my failure to meet her emotional needs. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you decide what kind of person you want to be, and I decide what kind of life I want to build. Can we be part of that life? That depends on you. She stood up, wiping her eyes. I should go. Mom doesn't know I'm here. Sarah? She turned back at the door. Whatever you decide, make sure it's your decision. Not your mother's, not Rick's, not anyone else's. You're 17 years old. It's time to start thinking for yourself. She nodded and left. I sat in the empty room for a long time after she was gone, thinking about forgiveness and consequences and the price of justice. The final act began the following Tuesday, when Rick showed up at my new job site. I was working on a kitchen renovation for an elderly couple on the east side of town. Good people who'd hired me based on referrals from satisfied customers, not because they felt sorry for me. The kind of work I'd always taken pride in, making someone's home better, more functional, more beautiful. Rick's patrol car pulled up around noon. He sat there for 10 minutes, engine running, trying to work up the courage to get out. Finally, he approached the front door. We need to talk, he said when the homeowner, Mrs. Chen, answered his knock. Actually, we don't, I called from the kitchen where I was installing new cabinet hardware. Remember that restraining order? This is official business. I came to the doorway, tool belt around my waist, work gloves in my hands. What kind of official business? We've had reports of maltreatment, stalking, threatening behavior. Mrs. Chen looked confused. Officer, Mr. Wilson has been nothing but professional. He's doing beautiful work on our kitchen. Ma'am, if you could just step outside for a moment. No, I said firmly. Mrs. Chen, you don't have to go anywhere. This is your house. Rick's face flushed. Wilson, you're under investigation for what? Filing a complaint against you? Exercising my legal rights, telling the truth in public? For maltreatment, for stalking, for making threats. I pulled out my phone and hit the record button. What threats would those be, Officer Donnelly? You know what you said? I know what I said. I told everyone the truth about what you and my wife did. I served you with legal papers in a public place. I exercised my constitutional right to free speech. You threatened me. When? Where? In front of witnesses who can testify to exactly what was said? He realized his mistake immediately. Any threats he claimed I'd made would have to be backed up by witness testimony. And the witnesses had all heard the same conversation I'd recorded. You're trying to destroy my life, he said, his voice cracking slightly. No, Rick, I'm trying to rebuild mine. There's a difference. Mrs. Chen was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Perhaps you gentlemen could take this discussion outside? Of course, I said. Officer Donnelly was just leaving. Weren't you, Rick? This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. He stood there for another moment, then turned and walked back to his patrol car. But instead of driving away, he sat there for another 20 minutes, just watching the house. I called his sergeant. Sergeant Murphy, this is Tommy Wilson. Officer Donnelly is currently parked outside my workplace in violation of a restraining order. I'd appreciate it if you could send someone to remove him before I have to file another complaint. Rick was gone within 5 minutes. Mrs. Chen poured me a glass of iced tea and sat down at her kitchen table. Mr. Wilson, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what was that all about? I explained the situation in broad strokes. The affair, the divorce, the maltreatment, the legal actions. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding. You know, she said when I finished, my husband cheated on me once, 20 years ago. I'm sorry. We worked it out, went to counseling, rebuilt our trust, stayed together, but it was hard work. And it only worked because he was truly remorseful and I was willing to forgive. Why are you telling me this? Because the key phrase is willing to forgive. You can't force forgiveness any more than you can force love. And you can't rebuild trust without both people wanting to rebuild it. I nodded. That's what I told my daughter. Your daughter came to see you? Yesterday. She's starting to see through the lies her mother's been telling. Mrs. Chen smiled. Children are resilient. They usually figure out the truth eventually. I hope so. What will you do if she does? If both your daughters want a relationship with you again? I thought about it while I measured the next cabinet door. I guess I'll find out what kind of father I am when I'm not trying to keep everyone happy all the time. The phone call came Thursday night. Linda crying so hard I could barely understand her. Tommy, please, I need help. I was lying on my motel bed, reading and enjoying the peace and quiet. What kind of help? Rick's been arrested. I sat up. For what? The investigation. They found evidence that he was taking bribes from contractors who wanted favorable treatment on inspection reports. It goes back years. I hadn't known about that. My complaints had triggered a broader investigation that uncovered corruption I'd never suspected. What does that have to do with me? They think I was involved because of my job at the bank. They think I was helping him launder the money. Were you? No, I swear, Tommy, I didn't know anything about it. But you knew about his cousin manipulating custody cases. You knew about him using department resources for personal business. You knew about a lot of things you didn't report. Silence on the other end. Tommy, they're talking about criminal charges. Conspiracy. I could go to prison. You should call a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. The bank fired me. Rick's assets are frozen. I don't have any money. You have the house. The house has a mortgage and bills and taxes. I can't keep up with the payments. I lay back down, staring at the water-stained ceiling. What do you want from me, Linda? I want you to tell them I wasn't involved, that I didn't know about the bribes. How would I know that? Because you know me. You know I'm not a criminal. Do I? Because 6 months ago I thought I knew you wouldn't cheat on me either. She started crying harder. Please, Tommy, I'm scared. You should be. Don't you have any compassion left? Any mercy? I thought about that question for a long time. You know what compassion is, Linda? Compassion is working 60-hour weeks to support your family and never complaining. Compassion is building a house with your own hands so your wife and daughters can have a beautiful home. Compassion is staying loyal to someone even when they take you for granted. Tommy, mercy is giving someone the benefit of the doubt when they don't deserve it. Mercy is forgiving someone who hurts you deeply. Mercy is walking away from a fight you could win because you love someone too much to destroy them. You're right. You're absolutely right, and I threw it all away. Yes, you did. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive me? To help me? I closed my eyes, remembering the man I used to be, the man who would have dropped everything to rescue her, even after what she'd done. Linda, I gave you 22 years of compassion and mercy. I gave you everything I had. And when things got difficult, when the romance wore off and real life set in, you threw it away for a fantasy with a corrupt cop who saw you coming from a mile away. I know I was stupid. You weren't stupid. You were selfish. There's a difference. So you won't help me? I thought about Sarah's visit, her tears, her apologies. I thought about Emma, afraid to face me because she knew she'd chosen the wrong side. I thought about the life we'd all had before Linda decided she deserved something better. I'll do one thing for you, I said finally. What? I'll tell the truth. If the investigators ask me what I know about your involvement in Rick's activities, I'll tell them exactly what I observed. Nothing more, nothing less. That's all. That's all. Tommy, I still love you. The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. No, I said when I found my voice again. You love the idea of me. You love having someone to rescue you when your bad decisions catch up with you. You love knowing there's always been someone in the background who would sacrifice everything for you. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you asked me how I was feeling? When's the last time you did something for me that didn't benefit you? When's the last time you thought about what I wanted or needed or dreamed about? She didn't answer. You don't love me, Linda. You love the security I represented, the safety net I provided, the unconditional support you could count on no matter how badly you treated me. I want to make it right. It can't be made right. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. I hung up and turned off my phone. The final confrontation came exactly where I'd expected it. At Murphy's bar on Friday night, where Rick's friends and supporters had gathered to drink away their troubles and plan their revenge. I wasn't planning to go there. I was having dinner at the diner minding my own business when Dave burst through the door looking panicked. Tommy, you need to get out of town, tonight. Why? Rick made bail. He's at Murphy's with half the fire department and 3 off-duty cops. They're drinking heavy and talking about teaching you a lesson. I finished my coffee, left money on the table, and stood up. Where are you going? To Murphy's. Are you insane? They'll eliminate you. No, I said calmly. They'll try to intimidate me. There's a difference. Tommy, these are not rational people. Rick's lost everything. His job, his reputation, his freedom. He's got nothing left to lose. Good. Then we're finally even. I walked the 3 blocks to Murphy's, Dave trailing behind and begging me to reconsider. The bar was crowded for a Friday night, with the usual mix of shift workers, retirees, and people who had nowhere else to go. Rick and his supporters had claimed the back corner, 6 men in various stages of intoxication nursing their grievances. They went quiet when I walked in. I ordered a beer and found an empty stool at the bar, deliberately sitting with my back to them. In the mirror behind the bottles, I could see Rick whispering urgently to his companions. The first move came after about 10 minutes. One of the off-duty cops, a guy named Stevens I'd known since high school, approached the bar. Wilson, you need to leave. I took a sip of my beer. Free country, Stevens. Free bar? Not tonight, it isn't. You threatening me, Officer Stevens, because I should mention that I'm recording this conversation. I held up my phone, red light blinking. His face went pale. Turn that off. No. I said turn it off. And I said no. The bartender, an older woman named Rose who'd been pouring drinks at Murphy's for 20 years, stepped between us. Stevens, you're drunk. Go home. Rose, this isn't your business. It's my bar. That makes it my business. Stevens looked around, suddenly aware that every conversation in the place had stopped. Everyone was watching, and most of them had their phones out. Wilson, this isn't over. Yes, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. It is. Stevens retreated to the back corner, but the damage was done. Every person in the bar had just watched a police officer threaten a private citizen for no legal reason. The second attempt was more subtle. One of Rick's firefighter friends, a guy named Johnson, struck up a conversation with me about work. Heard you're doing kitchen renovations now, he said, settling onto the stool next to mine. That's right. Getting much business? Enough. That's good. course, renovation work can be dangerous. Lots of ways a job can go wrong. Electrical problems, gas leaks, accidents happen. I turned to face him. Johnson, are you threatening my livelihood? Just making conversation. Because it sounds like you're suggesting that my work sites might experience mysterious accidents. I didn't say that. Good, because threatening someone's business would be extortion, which is a felony. And since I'm recording this conversation, any threats you make would be admissible in court. Johnson's beer suddenly required his full attention. The final attempt came from Rick himself. He'd been building up courage for an hour, and his friends had been egging him on. Finally, he stood up and walked to the bar. Tommy Wilson, he said, his words slightly slurred. The man who destroyed my life? I turned around slowly. Rick Donnelly, the man who destroyed his own life. You set me up. You planned this whole thing. I responded to what you did. There's a difference. You ruined everything. My career, my reputation, my future. You did that yourself. I just made sure people knew about it. He stepped closer, and I could smell the whiskey on his breath. I loved Linda. Really loved her. No, you didn't. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that love doesn't involve breaking up someone else's marriage. I know that love doesn't involve manipulating custody proceedings to hurt innocent children. And I know that love doesn't involve taking bribes and breaking the law. You sanctimonious son of a witch. You think you're better than me? I think I'm more honest than you. Honest? He laughed bitterly. You destroyed half the town with your little revenge campaign. I told the truth. If that destroyed people, maybe they shouldn't have been living lies. You're a bitter, vindictive man who can't let go of the past. Maybe, but I'm not a corrupt cop who sells his integrity for money. That hit home. Rick's face went red, and his hands clenched into fists. Outside, he said. Right now. No. What? I said no. You want to fight me, Rick? You'll have to do it right here in front of all these witnesses while I'm recording it on my phone. He looked around the bar, suddenly aware of how many people were watching, how many phones were pointed in his direction. You're a coward. I'm a man who learned the importance of witnesses. This isn't over. Rick, I said, standing up and facing him directly. Look around, really look. Your career is over. Your reputation is destroyed. You're facing criminal charges that will probably put you in prison. Linda's broke, unemployed, and facing her own legal troubles. Your friends are deserting you. Your future is gone. I gestured around the bar. This is it. This is all you have left. Drunk threats in a small-town bar in front of people who used to respect you. Is this really how you want to end this? For a moment, something like clarity flickered in his eyes. He looked around at his so-called supporters, most of whom were avoiding eye contact. He looked at the other patrons, who were recording his humiliation for posterity. He looked at himself in the mirror behind the bar, disheveled, drunk, desperate. I had everything, he said quietly. No, I corrected. You had the illusion of everything. And illusions don't last. I finished my beer and left money on the bar. Good night, Rick. Good luck with the trial. I walked out of Murphy's bar and into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear arguing, the sound of chairs scraping, someone calling for calm. But I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. 6 months later, I was putting the finishing touches on a bathroom renovation when my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. Dad, are you busy? Just finishing up a job. What's going on? Emma and I were wondering if you'd like to have dinner with us, somewhere nice. Our treat. I set down my caulk tool and stepped back to admire my work. Perfect corners, clean lines, everything level and square. The kind of work that would last. Just the three of us? Just the three of us. What's the occasion? Do we need an occasion to have dinner with our father? I smiled. I guess not. When and where? Saturday night, that new Italian place downtown? Sounds good. Should I pick you up? We'll meet you there. 7 o'clock? I'll be there. After she hung up, I finished cleaning my tools and packing up my equipment. The homeowners, a young couple with their first house, walked through the bathroom with amazement. Mr. Wilson, this is incredible, the wife said. It's exactly what we wanted. Better than what we wanted, her husband added. The craftsmanship is beautiful. I accepted their payment and their thanks, then loaded my truck and drove back to my apartment. I'd moved out of the motel 3 months earlier, into a small but comfortable place near downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Tommy, this is Linda. I know I don't have the right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that the charges against me were dropped. The prosecutor said there wasn't enough evidence to prove I knew about Rick's activities. Thank you for telling the truth. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Another text came through, this one from Sarah. Dad, I forgot to mention, Emma's bringing her boyfriend to dinner. Hope that's okay? I typed back, looking forward to meeting him, because that's what fathers do. They meet their daughters' boyfriends and try to determine if these young men are worthy of the amazing women their daughters are becoming. It had taken me a long time to remember what kind of father I wanted to be. Not the doormat who tolerated disrespect because he was afraid of losing love. Not the bitter ex-husband who let his pain poison every relationship. Just a man who loved his daughters enough to demand that they treat him with the same respect he showed them. I parked the truck and climbed the stairs to my apartment, thinking about Saturday night and wondering what Emma's boyfriend would be like. Hoping my daughters had learned something about choosing good men from watching their mother choose a bad one. At the top of the stairs, I found a package by my door. No return address, just my name written in careful block letters. Inside was a wood carving, a small but detailed model of a house complete with tiny shingles, working shutters, and a front porch with miniature rocking chairs. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the kind of work that takes months of patient effort. At the bottom was a small brass plaque, for the man who builds things that last. No signature, no note, no explanation, but I knew who it was from. Pete from the motel had mentioned taking up woodworking, and this had his careful attention to detail. I set the carving on my kitchen table and made myself dinner. Nothing fancy, just a sandwich and some soup. But I ate it slowly, savoring both the food and the silence. Outside my window, I could see the lights of the town where I'd spent my entire adult life. Some of those lights belonged to people who'd betrayed me, who'd chosen sides against me, who'd written me off as yesterday's news. But some of them belonged to people who'd given me second chances, who'd hired me based on my work rather than my reputation, who'd seen past the drama to the man underneath. It was enough. I cleaned up my dishes, checked my schedule for tomorrow's jobs, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would bring more work, more opportunities to build things that would last. And Saturday would bring dinner with my daughters, a chance to continue building the most important thing of all, a relationship based on honesty, respect, and love. Real love, the kind that doesn't require anyone to be less than they are, the kind that lasts.